Welcome to the Industry 4.0 podcast with Grantek.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of the Industry 4.0 podcast with Grantek. The Industry 4.0 podcast with Grantek delivers a look into the world of manufacturing with a focus on stories, trends that lead to better solutions. Our guests commonly share tips and outcomes that will improve your productivity and give you insight that you might not have thought of or expand on ideas that you're already thinking of and want to explore further. I'm Matthew Susi, a technical consultant with the Grantek team of digital solution providers. Today, I'm joined by Andrew Waycott, TwinThread. Andrew is the president and co-founder of TwinThread. He's passionate about the intersection of manufacturing, technology, and industrial AI and their impacts on efficiencies for today's manufacturers. For the past 2 decades, on a global scale, Andrew's nurtured his passion with the benefit of clients whose manufacturing processes have exhibited an untapped or business-critical growth and opportunity. Working in close cooperation with corporate leaders and operation managers, Andrew's overseen and managed projects that have helped thousands of customers generate millions in total savings. Andrew, thanks for joining me on the Industry 4.0 podcast. Love to hear more about what you're doing with TwinThread and kind of how you got into this space.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Matt. Super happy to be here and looking forward to talking to you about all things Industry 4.0. Yeah. And I guess in terms of how I got into this space, I've been in manufacturing my whole career, right out of actually during university even. I actually started out in as just an IT guy and fell in love with the shop floor and everything about making stuff very early on in my career. And even to this day, I think the thing that kind of moves me most about what I do is I get to go into a grocery store or a construction equipment store and look around, and practically everything that is in that store, I can kind of point to and say that I know how it's made and that I've impacted a company that makes that type of product. And it's just really nice for me to be able to feel, a physical, tangible outcome from the work that I've done every day in my career.
That's pretty awesome. You say you came from the IT side originally and then kind of found yourself falling in love with the production floor. You're, as I could call it, the blend of the IT OT space that we're seeing today, right?
Yeah.
Two coming together.
I would say so. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Even when you started out, what was the industry that you started out on? Was it food and beverage? Was it automotive manufacturing?
It was actually pulp and paper, and yeah, I got really lucky. My first job, actually still during school as like an intern, I got the opportunity to participate in a major expansion at a pulp and paper company, where they were building a new paper machine and pulp TMP line, and kind of one of the cool things about the pulp and paper industry, maybe in particular, is it's sort of like a whole bunch of little factories all in one. So there's batch process making, there's continuous process making, there's discrete processes. And so you kind of get an ability kind of in one facility to see practically every kind of manufacturing process out there. Obviously there's hundreds and thousands of different nuances on that, but at a broad scale, you get to see a lot of everything. And I think I've been very fortunate from that early experience that I've been able to sort of walk onto any shop floor anywhere in the world and really recognize bits of and pieces of different parts of that process, and of course in many other processes I've seen since then, and sort of connect the dots, if you will. So it's been a pretty lucky kickoff to my career.
It's pretty phenomenal, right? Like you got to get the full breadth of all the different types of manufacturing and the styles of it, right? And really see it firsthand, right? All in one facility too. So you got to see it in all different aspects within that industry. And that's kind of expanded as your career has gone, right? And what's interesting too is you have all this experience, you've kind of seen the industry grow and expand and evolve, right? Like today on this podcast, we're talking Industry 4.0, and from talking with others, everyone kind of has their own take and viewpoint of it. What's Industry 4.0 mean for you in your kind of experience in your career so far?
I mean, I'm going to say, data-driven excellence is really what Industry 4.0 is. And the funny thing is, I've been doing more or less a version of the same thing for 30 years. It's always been data-driven excellence. It had different names all through that time. Industry 4.0 is the latest the latest version of that. Yeah, exactly. Maybe 5.0 now, but all of the above is really about um, using the insight that can be gained from the industrial data in the equipment in your plant, and turning that data and the signals about your process into insight that you can derive ways to improve and optimize a process. Of course, also things like supply chain and things like that as well. But at least in my sphere and my focus, it's really about the shop floor and understanding better about all the variability and and drivers of inefficient operations and surfacing up ways to make that better.
You kind of touched on a point that's really interesting to me is that Industry 4.0, that's the latest term, but we've been doing it in the industry for a number of years, right? In your 30-year career so far, we've had historians, we've had other ways of collecting data. They've all been, say, data silos, or even as simply as an output of data as CSVs, right? But we've always been collecting it. We've always been trying to improve on it. Process engineering's always been there. It feels like now we're really realizing the power of all that data, the power of cleaning that data, the power of putting it into AI models, right? Or machine learning algorithms, and actually leveraging that and doing something more with it, right? So I think we've all had those experiences where we've had data in this historian for 15 years, but we quickly realized we haven't been using it, or it wasn't actually good for 95% of the time. We can't use it for something.
Yep.
Do you think there's misconceptions in the industry of how people should be using the data, how we've been storing that data, what we should be doing with it? Just a general, we've always been doing it this way.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that first job at a university, we installed uh, one of the very early Pi historians, Windows-based Pi historians. So prior to that, OSI Pi had a VMS system and all kinds of stuff. I'm not that old, but um, the that historian back in, I think it was 96 or 97, had over 100,000 tags in it. And, they're still collecting those 100,000 tags in that mill today. Um, and, you know, many factories like that are doing the same. And frankly, it's been not doing much for them in that 30 years until recently, right? Like, it's been sort of data overload. What do we do with this? How can we get value from it? And the primary use of it in many cases with companies until recently has been looking at, you know, copies of HMI SCADA screens and kind of trending maybe the last day of data and stuff, but really very little about mining all that valuable information and turning it into proper insight and realization of what can be. And so, yeah, there's definitely been a lot of loss of use of that information over time. The good news is it's still there, it's still valuable, and the fact that they've been capturing it for so long is really a gold mine for those companies. Now, conversely, I still come across companies today that have nothing like that at all, and they're just starting on their journey of collecting and archiving data. And one of the first messages I give those companies when I'm talking to them about TwinThread is whether you decide to do business with us or not, start collecting data right now, because the minute you start is the minute you're beginning to build up that huge value of potential information and insight that you're going to get down the road.
I think you touch on a really important factor, right? And that is just get started, right? Just get data, start collecting it, get connected to your devices, start pulling things in, right? Like we said, we started with the extreme cases. People have been collecting data for 30 years, not necessarily using it now, but now they're starting to, right? And on the other end of the spectrum, many people out there that really have had nothing. They've had siloed machines that maybe collect a day's worth of data at best in some cases, or nothing at all. So,
Right.
simply put, let's get connected. Let's start trending some data points. Let's get some stuff into a historian, right? So that we can use that, so we can start collecting good data and put it into models. It's an important thing I think more people need to be aware of, right? Just because you have nothing today doesn't mean you don't have something tomorrow. The biggest thing is making that leap and starting things, right?
Exactly. Yep.
I guess in kind of a similar vein, in your experience so far, what's kind of the biggest misconception that you've been kind of coming across operations leaders when they want to say, put industrial AI in or start scaling up their industrial AI?
It's actually it's actually that last point you made. You know, there's a lot of uh people think that this is really hard. And I mean, don't get me wrong, it can be,
Sure.
but it doesn't have to be hard to start. Like, if you're a company that hasn't collected any data to date, one of the solutions that TwinThread offers, we call perfect centerline. And and most manufacturers in the market know what a center line is. They probably have a center line in their process where they're, coming up with standard limits and targets for their product, all their process parameters for a given recipe. And telling their operations teams, this is how you have to run this product. Um, what we've done is we built a solution that uses AI to kind of help find what those center lines should be and maintain those for you in a much more automated way and prescriptive way for your operators to use. Well, the thing is, you can get center lines and implement a center lining strategy, data driven center lining strategy, with about 2 to 3 months of data. And so if you have nothing, 2 to 3 months from now, you can be running center lines on all your processes, in a manner that is just, you know, dramatically more reliable and consistent than what you've probably been able to do to date. So, like, don't make it a big intergalactic thing. Set a small objective for yourself and go for it, right? And by the way, if you have 30 years of data, you could have that center line in 2 days and be driving interesting value for your operations.
It's interesting, right? Because, like, to the earlier points again, people might have been, if you've been collecting data for 30 years, sitting on that gold mine, right? You have all this information, you have all this good data. You could start training center lines as early as tomorrow, right? And putting that data into the pipeline, training the algorithm, and now you're starting to get that better center line data, that better, more or less optimized processing, right?
Yep.
And on the flip side, the barrier to entry is much shorter than people really think, as you described, right? Let's trend today, trend tomorrow. We can start having center aligning happening in 2 months' time, 3 months' time.
Yep.
And that's not just one process, that's all your processes in the facility. So really you're dispelling that misconception that it's going to be this grandiose adventure, this grandiose investment. Like, you can really get going on things very quickly now, which is impressive. It's quite wild, right? I
Yeah.
mean,
And it's also like, everybody, perfection is the enemy of good enough a little bit on this stuff, right? Like,
of course.
people don't have every sensor they need for every use case that they want to do, but you do have the sensors you need to get started, and let the gaps in your sensor strategy perhaps be exposed through the use of those systems, and kind of guide your investments with realizations of potential value. So, every factory practically on the planet has some critical mass of data that can be tapped into today. And so get at it, see what you can get from it, and let that, guide you to the next step. It doesn't have to be perfection before you can get really good, interesting value out of these systems.
Like, it's curious there because, like, if you use what you have today, you can quickly identify these gaps in these areas or these blind spots, right? And the blind spots that you thought you had might not be the ones that are suddenly a priority anymore, right?
That's right.
You're letting your own data currently help guide your path forward, which is pretty cool when you think about it, right? We're making a calculated investment based on the data that we're getting back. So you're getting a return on investment in a different way that most people probably don't think about.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times that we've embarked on projects with customers where, you know, the stated objective was X, but as the project evolved, we realized really sometimes some very simple things are actually underlying drivers of challenges for that customer. And frankly, often it's simple. It's simple things like, um, yesterday was a really, really great day, but all the last week before that was horrible. Well, what's the difference between great and horrible? It doesn't have to be it's more fancy than that. Like, understand what's driving your process to look a certain way one day and a different way another day. And if I can help you make every day be like the really good day, the value driver that you get out of that is phenomenal. And it can literally be as simple as that.
That's a good way to look at things, or a way I want to start looking at things more, where we don't need to overcomplicate it, right?
Mhm.
There's all this technology out there. There's these big talking points, these big, for lack of better words. So we're using it here to describe things, but we need to get back to keeping it simple and saying you just need to start with things. We need to collect data. We need to train models. We need to start seeing what we get back from it and having that drive our decisions, right?
Yep.
It's no longer like gut feel of that industry experience necessarily. Industry experience is always necessary, but we have the data and the tools that can help guide us and make those decisions faster with a quicker return on investment, right?
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
We've got to start changing our mindset with this whole industry 4.0 evolution as our current term for it.
Hmm.
As we kind of go through this evolution and we see things rapidly changing here, what do you see as the biggest challenge for manufacturers in the coming 5 years as we push agentic AI and more machine learning and more data collection?
This is sort of a little bit of an old answer maybe, but I think it's still the right answer. Manufacturing is really at a crossroads in terms of accessibility to workforce, and especially experienced, folks. Ever since the pandemic, turnover in our industries has been, you know, very significant. We're losing a lot of talent, and while we are obviously getting new, fresh engineers and team members all the time, a lot of experience is has been lost, and there's just it's almost a crisis, I guess, in a way, in terms of our workforce, and I think that as we look forward, leveraging Industry 4.0 to solve that problem is really the most critical aspect of this. There's some pretty amazing stuff happening in that front. I think some of the stuff we do at TwinThread is a great part of that story. We have customers where um, they've literally lost 10 plus years of average experience in their workforce and have driven increased productivity over that same period of time by leveraging some of the tools we have to drive prescriptive guidance on how they run their machines, and how to optimize instead of it being a little black book in someone's back pocket. But also industrial AI and excuse me, like Gen AI, and being able to ask questions in a way that's a little more um, comfortable to I guess newer generations, and interact with data that way instead of having to know how to write Python code to do that, is really also supercharging people's abilities to gain insight from information, and have that data and insight be accessible. Means that you can do more with less people, and you can make sure you get the right answer faster. So, we can solve some of these sort of workforce problems with technology as well.
I think that's a really critical point, right? Like early in my career, some of the best insights I always got was being on the plant floor, talking to operators, talking with the maintenance staff, the supervisors, people that knew the process inside and out. And like you said here, when that person leaves, that little black book of all the notes and everything leaves with them, and suddenly you have these gaps where the team knew what was going on the floor, but they left with that knowledge. They left with that processing. So now more than ever, we need tools like TwinThread, like all this data that we're collecting in these systems to give us that context, right? To understand how things are going to operate, how to weather the storm of the attrition and the shortages that we're kind of incurring, right? Because post COVID, we're really struggling with that. We're always trying to make sure that we have documentation, we have the SOPs of things, we have those center lined ideas or how the operator knew how to run things optimally, right? And, on the other side of it, being able to expend that data or give that knowledge to others, knowledge transfer. It's a critical thing, right? Something, every industry has always struggled with, but having tools like this help us kind of bridge that gap, right? Kind of be that subject matter expert person, but it is a AI or we can speak to almost in a way, right? Or it's a tool that can indicate and show us, in place of that subject matter person not being available to us. It's a it's an interesting challenge, and it's also not a new one, but it's exciting because we have persons like yourself that are actually addressing it and see the elephant in the room and are saying, let's make a solution for this. Right? It's a fascinating problem that we're encountering and fascinating solutions come out of that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, we've talked about data and all this, and with AI, you need good data, you need clean data, you need things that are going to, be effective for the model to be trained upon, right? At the same challenge in the industry right now, standardization has always been a challenge, right? Data standardization, interoperability between multiple vendors and everything else continues to be a problem. How are you guys kind of handling that? How are you kind of addressing that challenge as you go to all these different customer sites and different industry verticals?
Yeah. Yeah. This is I guess a bit of a, uh, area of passion for me, as all of the bigger, particularly manufacturing companies out there are starting to think and talk about building out industrial data lakes. They're sort of in some respects unwiring what was wired for many years. And I talked about Pi and my first company there with 100,000 tags. If you actually look at the industrial landscape, and particularly with time series historian type data, um, doesn't really matter if it's Pi or GE Prophecy or AspenTech IP21 or any of the big industrial historian players. They all basically had a very similar pattern for storing and accessing data. So as a third party vendor like myself, I could go in to any of those companies and pretty confidently say I can access their data in an efficient, almost out of the box way. Um, the problem now is those companies are moving all that data up into the cloud, into things like Databricks and Snowflake and Microsoft Fabric, etc. All great tools, but there's no such thing as a standard way to store that time series data in the cloud. And so what's happening is they're all making their own decisions about how to structure and store that data, and it's causing the market to essentially move to a very custom build, model, and to me that is a risk for the market overall. Once your data is non-standard, you're essentially beholden to having to continue perpetuating that custom development model in your own company. Um, so I'm concerned about that. I do see some promising moves in that regard. The whole UNS stuff has started to take hold, more for real-time data than for historian data at this point,
Right.
time series data. But there is starting to be some conversations about what the right way to structure and store data is. From our perspective, what we've done is we've developed a solution that essentially goal is to restructure that data. And so as we connect to historical data sources, whether they be cloud-based things in Databricks, Snowflake, et cetera, or on-premise things, we're sort of bringing those into our platform and using integrations, normalizing that data again into digital twins as our sort of way of structuring information. And so it's possible to kind of rewire the standards, if you will, but I think as an industry we can do a lot better job of that by putting some sort of structure around that for all of the different vendors to sort of work with.
I think it's a very good point, right? Because we're getting into this vendor specific type of setup where each vendor has their own thread and flavor, and we're all kind of falling over on ourselves trying to navigate that and what's the winning. But we win most when we're standardized. We win most when we come together and say, this is the known standard that we're going to use, right? It, this almost sounds a little bit silly, and maybe it is, but it's like we need a unified namespace for our unified namespace, right? We need the run rules of how we're going to all interact with one another, right?
Right.
And
Yep.
what's almost fascinating to me is that this is with newer technologies, right? And previously, when we were say trying to integrate with legacy equipment, and even as basic as this, pulling information from say relays and having a data area that's monitoring those relay signals, right? Now we've got the other end of the spectrum where we're back to I believe my way is the best way, so this is how I'm going to do it. But what's amazing or really interesting to me is you guys have kind of made your own UNS or data massaging on your side that handles this. Are you a legacy equipment? Are you something brand new, say like a Snowflake or a Databricks? We'll normalize all that data in our ecosystem so it's all uniform, it's all the same.
Right.
That enables you to have that digital twin that really mimics and shows, what's happening on the plant floor physically, but also here's your digital twin that's replicating that. And I think that's important. I think people have to come around to that idea, right? They have to come around to this normalization across the entirety of their organization. I'd love to hear more. I'd love to explore more with you about how you're handling that. We'll call it the normalization on the TwinThread side of things.
Yeah, a core sort of tenet of our platform when we built it was the concept of scale. And if you're a company that has whatever 10,000 pumps across your organization, every one of those pumps probably has a different name for temperature, bearing temperature or whatever.
Probably.
And they all more or less equal the same thing. But if you don't have them all named the same name or some way to easily recognize it's the same thing, it limits your ability to analyze that data set across all the pieces of equipment. So normalization is the answer to that. There's many ways of doing that. Our way of doing that is the digital twin. And so when we configure digital twins for a piece of equipment, we can associate classes to that. And so you can have a class for a pump, you can have a class for a brand of pump, you can have a class for a model within that brand. You can also maybe have a class that indicates that this pump is pumping water and this pump is pumping oil, right? So basically being able to structure and describe those pieces of equipment a little bit abstracted from that specific piece of equipment, and then you wire it into the various data streams. So obviously it's getting the specific data it has. But if you do it that way, you now have a very common language across all these pieces of equipment that where it makes sense to, you can combine, analyze, apply a model from one piece of equipment to another piece of equipment, et cetera. And that really allows for that, overall normalization, right? And then, of course, in our case, we also have a lot of what we call agents, which are our way of talking to legacy data sources and things like that, that allow us to kind of stream data into this platform, and then, like I said, wire it to the appropriate parameter on a given twin. And the end state is we now have this sort of overall, sort of like a UNS, but this thing that just kind of commonly describes that across your entire fleet of equipment.
And that's brilliant with that too, is now that if you stay started at site A and site A is in Toronto, then you can go replicate that in New York. You can replicate that in Fremont. You can drop this in any of them. And every site is following that same normalized piece, even though they could be calling to say the temperatures of the motor different in different spots, right? You have that equal and normalize across your whole organization so that each site knows the run rules of how they're going to integrate and how they're going to work. And it's a new site, it's an old site, you have an answer for legacy equipment or brand new greenfield equipment, right? You're really making sure that the digital twins are ready to accept all of that data and then can pull that in a uniformed way, right?
Yep.
And you can share that information up too. So you guys, you're tackling the standardization problem head on, right? And it sounds like you've been doing it for quite a long time now too.
Yeah, I mean, we've been around for 10 years as TwinThread. The founders of TwinThread have been doing this for our whole careers, though. So yeah, it's definitely a passion of ours to normalize data, but it's really more than that. It's make industrial data accessible to the masses, and take it out of the hands of the IT teams that love IT, but then expose it to the people in the trenches, so in a manner that they can actually get access to that information, and drive value from it on the shop floor day in and day out. Yeah.
That's We're removing the gates that we put up over the years, right? Like you said, we're making data accessible to our process engineers, to our supervisors, to our operators, right? It's exciting. It's exciting to me in the sense that we're making the daily day-to-day operations on the floor better, right? We can make someone's, daily job more enjoyable. We can improve problems that are happening. We can make it a more efficient time. We can make it a less stressful time with a lot of the stuff we're doing. So that's personally exciting for me, honestly. What are you seeing with the executives that are in this field? What are they getting excited about in manufacturing? And then I think I'm going to ask you what you're most excited about with it too.
Yeah, I mean, I think executives are really primarily focused on, in the end of the day, bottom line and productivity, right? Um, when I talked about the workforce crisis or challenges coming. In the end of the day, the opportunity to grow productivity while seeing, your workforce dwindling is critical. It's a major risk for these companies, and seeing that sort of an answer be unlocked there, I think is key. And to be clear, I'm not saying they're seeing an opportunity to reduce their workforce. I'm saying they're seeing an opportunity to address the challenge that they have with a lack of workforce. So I think there's big excitement around that. Not to mention just you know, the overall ability to do more with less. I mentioned earlier about the good days and the bad days, and if we can help a company make every day its best day, the amount of potential increased productivity in the world is massive, right? Like, um, I hear a lot of people talking about Industry 4.0 and coming up with examples of, well, I want to, you know, I want to be able to make X, Y, and Z 20% better than I've ever made it before. And I mean, don't get me wrong, that's great, but
Sure.
why not look at your existing story of your plant in the last year and look at how often you've made it the best you've ever made it before. And what you'll find is that the answer is not that often. It's very few companies in the world every single day make the product the best they possibly can make it. And so if you can take that sort of averaging down that happens in factories and find that gap and get back up to every day make the best product you make, the amount of productivity growth that would translate to in the world is phenomenal.
It's just when you think about it, you think about the economy of that, where the amount of efficiency you gain, the quality you gain, the happiness as a consumer of that product that receives that, knowing the quality is that consistent, right? Like, how many times have we gone out and even say it's groceries and you buy a bottle of one thing and it's great today, but you buy it tomorrow, it's not so much. But now you're getting that consistent. I know exactly what I'm getting for. That's what we're all after, ultimately, right? We love that consistency. That's a good feeling. You always want to be, building the best you can be every single day. I mean, you're just going to be all around happier through and through with all of that.
Yep. And sometimes trying to make your best even better makes the not best days even worse. So like my advice is like get the best days more consistently best first. And then once you've done that successfully, now you can start trying to improve your best day incrementally better all the time. But that should be step 2, not step 1. And I do think when I talk to executives, they agree and they get that. But that most certainly is the thing that gets me most excited.
I like that. I like that a lot, right? Because whether it's in industry, whether it's in sports, whether it's in just your daily life, we're always striving for that consistent ceiling we want to hit, right? And then once we hit that ceiling, we can raise the bar again, right? There's no point in trying to raise the ceiling if we can't continuously reach it, right? It's kind of a fool's errand, so to speak. That's you bring up a really, really good point, and one I'm going to keep kind of harping on, because everyone's so obsessed with it, improving what we were best on, but we try to be consistently the best at it. But we try to be consistently hitting that target, that threshold, right? And I think when our chase to always move the line, we forget we should always be reaching the line consistently. That's a great insight. Do you, I guess more on the return on investment side of things, that we chase this consistency? Is this one of the main opportunities we see in Industry 4.0? Is there other things in Industry 4.0 we see as a huge return on investment opportunity for everyone from integrators to the end users and manufacturers?
I would, I guess as a theme, I think almost everything falls within that. Arguably, like people talk about, downtime, prediction, prevention, maintenance use cases, quality optimization, all these things that are sort of big ROI drivers, fundamentally are sub bullets of that broader theme of consistency and stabilization, and then moving the needle. I would argue, Industry 4.0 is much broader than just that, though. Like there's a huge element of supply chain optimization, and ironically, I'd argue even that though gets back to consistency.
Right.
If you think supply chain, one of the big things people think about is fill rate, right? How reliably you can deliver and fulfill an order for your end customer, right? And if your fill rate is, picking a number, 10 days, it's better for you to always be 10 days than to be some days, sometimes 12 days and sometimes 8 days, because they're planning for warehouse space and shelf space and all those types of things based on your fill rate, right? Well, how do you control fill rate? You consistently manufacture so that you can consistently keep your inventory at a certain level, or your speed to turn around an order at a certain level. So in the end of the day, this all does come back to consistency throughout the supply chain, all the way from receiving raw materials through manufacturing, through the actual logistics of getting a product to the shelf.
That's gonna be my new bullet point header, I think, is consistency. Yeah. We've kind of strived away from it a little bit as we've been pushing the bar, and
Yeah.
like we need to remember that's what we're also chasing. We're chasing that consistency, right? Consistency is reliability. It is that confidence in things, right? That's a really good thread. Thank you.
Yeah. I do want to say, like, when I talk about that with TwinThread, we do predict downtime. We do optimize quality in factories, etc. But we do that as much in this sort of lens as anything else. Like I with downtime, for example, customers are always wanting to, one of the first questions I usually get from either partners or customers is, well, can you predict the downtime on my machine? And my answer is, yes, we can. But wouldn't you rather I prevent the downtime on your machine? Like, there's a difference between predicting and preventing. And preventing means you don't actually have to predict the downtime, because if you've run your plant properly, you're going to dramatically reduce how frequently you have downtimes, because you've learned how to run your plant in a way that doesn't cause downtime, right? Which goes back to stability.
Which and we're shaking that idea of this reactive mindset also, right? We think of downtime. I want to predict when the downtime's coming, but to your point, when we're consistent and we know, okay, I can see a downtime coming, I'm going to stop that, right? Whether it's through models of we've been monitoring the vibration on a motor, right? And we know that it's shaking more. We know something's going to come, and we can stop that and do preventive maintenance and keep it running, right?
Yeah.
We're getting into more of that proactive mindset now. You've enabled the industry to be more proactive in a way, right?
Exactly.
TwinThread Tools is enabling that proactiveness, and that in turn leads to consistency. Consistency learns to, a happier everybody in the process of it. When we talk about all these different industries and other things, and there's different consistency in all of them, is there one industry you're quite surprised that you've helped so much as you have? One that you didn't think you would be a fit for, or just overall was a surprise?
So, I guess two answers. The first is kind of a non-answer, but I'll have an answer right after. The non-answer is I think one of the most surprising, goes back to my first comment about the pulp and paper mill, is just how many similarities there are across all these industries. Like, if I'm in a a pet food factory, right? They're in a dog kibble, for example. The first part of their process is essentially a giant spaghetti machine that's extruding dough, right? Just like that Play-Doh machine that you probably played with as a kid. You can obviously, a spaghetti factory would have the same thing. In the plastics industry, there's extrusions in plastic as well. So like that type of process of extrusion is across many, 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 many different types of manufacturing, right? Similarly, my pulp and paper mill, there's a batch process at the very beginning for making the pulp. Well, how many different manufacturing processes have a batch making component to them? And, if you start to actually unpack what these companies make into the subcomponents, you quickly realize that there's a lot of similarities between them. And I guess I find it really neat how, in my case, being able to see all these different industries, I recognize all these similarities. Whereas if you've kind of spent your career in one industry, there's sort of an assumption that it's really unique and special. And there are always different unique things about every industry, but there's a lot of cool things you can learn across industry as well. And then to answer your specific question, we built our product with an intent of delivering solutions to manufacturers, primarily hybrid and process manufacturers, I would say. Um, but we're using our product to monitor the health of batteries in data centers, in hundreds of thousands of batteries around the world. There's a decent chance that if you're asking for a answer for one of the LLMs out there, that the battery system backing up that data center, its health is being monitored by TwinThread. And so I would never have guessed that in the beginning of this, that our system would be as good at doing that as it is at optimizing the quality of your food product in a factory.
That is seriously impressive. To you really, because I mean, I'm biased. I was default to manufacturing, right? And I think about the manufacturing process and continuous or batch or just the overall setup of what we're doing here, right? But battery monitoring and data centers, I mean, this is a whole industry that's exploding with the current state of things, but also one I would never really even thought of, right? So you're really applicable across many different ways. And you bring up a really great point I want to touch on earlier with the answer, non-answer. But many of these industries, right, while they all feel unique and they have their own way of doing things, have also many similarities, right? The dog food one is a great example. The slurry, right, the dough that comes out as an extruded process, that's no real difference than pasta making or other dough making. It's no different than, say, plastic extrusion, right? It's still an extrusion process, right? It's using the metals and everything. And suddenly you see these similarities that cross over between all of the industries, right? And that correlates quite well to exactly what you described, monitoring batteries in data centers, right? You never thought, you could never imagine, but suddenly you can see where there's overlap of things, right? When the overlap of the behavior of the battery and how you can trend that, how you can model that behavior, how you can make a digital twin of it and indicate when you're going to have challenges and other issues with it. It's really, again, I harp on this a lot. I sound like a broken record, but it's an exciting time, right? We're getting to build cool solutions in industries we never thought we would kind of touch and branch. That's the fun side of this industry evolution, right? The industries or we'll say the verticals themselves are no longer siloed. We're sharing information with one another that we never thought we would. So that's quite the journey right there.
Yep, for sure.
That was a great answer, to be honest. I've kind of stopped on that one. But I do want to do this, and with all my guests, I like to give you an opportunity to basically ask me a question that you'd like me to answer, or that ask our guests about it. And commonly, is there an Industry 4.0 question that you're pondering that you'd like answered, that you'd like to see the industry answer, or get my take on?
Yeah. So the thing that I'm most kind of curious about is, when I look at where we are in 2026, industrial AI is being used everywhere. It's the talk of the town. When you think about what that means, or what pieces of industrial AI or Industry 4.0 is being kind of underutilized in the market right now. Like, what is that thing about industrial AI that potentially is the unlocked code that nobody's thinking about right now?
It's a very good question, because you hear about it in discussions from industry events to peer-to-peer conversations to podcasts like we're having here, right? What is the untapped opportunity? What is that greatest return on investment, you could even say, right? And from my own view, my own opinion, it's the ability to query an agent and interact with it and get responses. I think that's powerful. I think there's value to that. But I think at the core of it, and we've already kind of touched on it, it's the consistency in your process, right? It's the ability to get things modeled, get things consistent, get things where you know when something is abnormal so you can triage it and immediately go after it. when you look at the industry for years and years, we've had whole groups in manufacturing facilities that are dedicated to process engineering and improving reliability engineers, for example, right? And keeping things up and running and consistent with a higher quality, less downtime, higher cycle time. But again, it comes down to consistency. We should be using AI models, machine learning, and stuff that we've been doing for many years, but we should be doing it to make the process a consistent one. We should be identifying when things are not following to our consistency and hemming it there, right? I think using my own career as a bias, when you're helping build, say, a MES system, for example, for doing traceability and recalls, right? There's a lot difference of recalling 100 parts versus recalling 100,000 parts. So if we have AI tools that are there that can tell us when we're deviating immediately or we're going to have an event that's falling out of our spec and stop that from getting up the door even, we're improving people's safety of lives for the consumers that are going to use that. We're improving the plant's overall stress. Quality departments aren't having to go and fish through thousands of totes of bins to understand what was all lost. We're saving on money for the overall company. I think, again, we've already kind of touched on it. This is my biased point of view, but we should be focusing upon that consistency to have these tools there to kind of catch us before things get out of control or out of hand. I think that's probably our biggest opportunity, but I'm sure a couple of our guests are going to have quite a few different viewpoints on that. So hopefully I'm just one of those ones.
Yeah, looking forward to hearing.
Yeah. Well, it's been great talking with Andrew. I do like to give an opportunity toward the end of the call. If there's anything you want to talk about with TwinThread, anything you guys are excited about that you're kind of releasing coming this year, anything you're doing now that you really want to talk about, I want to give you that opportunity to, kind of discuss it right here.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, it's a big year, 2026 for TwinThread. I mentioned earlier our perfect centerline solution, which we launched an updated version of here not that long ago. And sort of as we move through the year, we're going to be launching a kind of I think of it like the sister solution for the batch making industry, which we call Perfect Batch. And then in addition to that, I mentioned our Gen AI component, which we call TwinThread Advisor, launched late last year, and are going to be continuing to grow and add capabilities to over the course of 2026. One I think, and playing off my own question there from a moment ago, for me, when I look at industrial AI, I see a lot of focus on Gen AI in that industrial AI word, and Gen AI is a big part of that. But what I like about your answer is, to me, the fundamentals of data, understanding of what's going on in a process and what's happened in a process is as important to industrial AI as the Gen AI component is. And so what we've done with TwinThread Advisor is we've given a capability that allows process engineers, operators, etc., to explore and mine the information about what's happened and the facts from the process and the digital twin to get answers about how to make things run better and to diagnose problems that exist. And our TwinThread Advisor that's, as I said, just recently been released and will be continuing to be added to over the course of 2026 is really the unlock code of mining all of that awesome information that we've been providing clients for years now in a way that allows them to quickly and effectively deliver solutions on the shop floor. So
That's awesome. I need to set up a time with you guys to kind of go through that and start playing around with the advisor. There's a lot of power to that, right? You're giving the power back to the operators, back to the supervisors, back to the engineers. And I think that's what we should be doing from my bias point of view. That's awesome. I'm looking forward to getting under with it. Thanks again for joining me, Andrew. It's been a great talk. It's been a great podcast. Like to thank everyone for listening and joining from us. Hopefully you get as much insight that I got from Andrew and can kind of take those thoughts away and digest them and kind of come up with some good ideas for TwinThread to evaluate with you. If you have an opportunity, please follow Grantek on LinkedIn to stay up to date with everything we're doing. Subscribe to the Industry 4.0 podcast with Grantek, where we get your podcasts. If you have questions for Andrew or myself, or for Grantek in general, feel free to email us at info@grantek.com. And we look forward to you joining us on the next Industry 4.0 podcast with Grantek. Thanks, everyone.